Web services. In the next 4 chapters, you will create an application named Photorama that reads in a list of interesting photos from Flickr. Photorama application. This chapter will lay the foundation and focus on implementing the web service requests responsible for fetching the metadata for interesting photos, as well as downloading the image data for a specific photo. Your application uses HTTP to communicate with a web service. Your client application and a web service can exchange requests and responses via HTTP. Because HTTP does not care what data it transports, these exchanges can contain complex data. This data is typically in JSON format. Photorama will make a web service request to get interesting photos from Flickr. The web service is hosted at this address. The data returned will be JSON containing the remote URL of the photo. You can then download and display the photo from that remote URL. Now, create a new single-view application named Photorama. Let's knock out the basic UI before focusing on web services. Create a new Swift file named Photos View Controller. Define the Photos View Controller class and give it an image view property. Open main.storyboard. Change the View Controller's class to Photos View Controller. With the Photos View Controller selected, embed the in Navigation Controller. Make the Navigation Controller as the initial view controller. Drag an image view onto the canvas for Photos View Controller and add a constraint to pin it to all edges of the super view. Open the Attributes Inspector for the image view and change the content mode to Aspect Fill. Finally, double-click on the center of the navigation bar for the Photos View Controller and give it a title of Photorama. The View Controller.swift file is unused. You can delete it. Sending the request. Building the URL. Communication with service is done via requests. You will create 2 tabs to deal with all of the web service information. The Flickr API struct will be responsible for knowing and handling all Flickr-related information. The photo store class will handle the actual web service calls. Let's start by creating the 2 Swift files for the tabs. Create a new Swift file named Flickr API. And then create another Swift file named Photo Store. At the top of Flickr API.swift, declare a custom enum to represent possible errors for the Flickr API. In Flickr API.swift, create the method enumeration. Each case of the method has a raw value that matches the corresponding Flickr endpoint. Using an enum now will make it easier to add endpoints in the future. Type-level property-based URL string is used to refer to the base URL string of the web service requests. Now you are going to create a type method that builds up the Flickr URL for a specific endpoint. This method accepts 2 arguments. The first specifies which endpoint to hit using the method enumeration, and the second will be an optional dictionary of query item parameters associated with the request. Define and implement the interesting photos URL computed property, and then create a constant that references this API key. The author of this book has already generated an API key for this application by creating a Flickr account and registering this application. Use URL session data task to transfer this request to the server. In PhotoStore.Swift, declare the PhotoStore class. In order to simplify the work, you'd better design the PhotoStore as a singleton mode. The property session is used to hold an instance of URL session. In PhotoStore.Swift, implement the fetch interesting photos method to create a URL request that connects to api.flickr.com and asks for the list of interesting photos. Then use the URL session to create a URL session data task that transfers this request to the server. Creating the URL request is fairly straightforward. You create a URL instance using the Flickr API struct and instantiate a request object with it. By giving the session a request and a completion closure to call when the request finishes, the session will return an instance of URL session task. Because Photorunner is requesting data from a web service, the type of task will be an instance of URL session data task. Tasks are always created in suspended state, so calling resume on the task will start the web service request. In PhotosViewController.Swift, override view.didLoad and fetch the interesting photos. Build and run the application. A string representation of the JSON data coming back from the web service will print to the console. JSON data response. The response will look something like this. The relevant pieces of information that you will need for this application are the ID, the title, the URLh, and the date taken. Modeling the photo. Now you will create a photo class to represent each photo that is returned from the web service request. You will use this class shortly once you are parsing the JSON data. In PhotoStore.Swift, add 3 enumerations. In Flickr API.Swift, implement a method photos that takes an instance of data and uses the JSON serialization class to convert the data into the basic foundation objects. This code will generate some errors. You will resolve them shortly. You will need an instance of date formatter to convert the date taken string into an instance of date. In Flickr API.Swift, add a constant instance of date formatter. Still in Flickr API.Swift, write a new method to parse a JSON dictionary into a photo instance. Next, in PhotoStore.Swift, write a new method that will process the JSON data that is returned from the web service request. Finally, update the method signature for fetch interesting photos to take in a completion closure that will be called once the web service request is completed. The closure is marked with the @escaping annotation. This annotation lets the compiler know that the closure might not get called immediately within the method. In this case, the closure is getting passed to the URL session data task, which will call it when the web service request completes. This figure describes the flow of data with the web service request. When the web service completes, you want it to update the image view. But by default, URL session data task runs the compilation handler on a background thread. You need a way to force code to run on the main thread to update the image view. Operation Q.main.addOperationHere method will call their compilation handlers on the main thread. In Photos View controller.swift, update the implementation of the view did load using the trailing closure syntax to print out the result of the web service request. Build and run the application. Once the web service request completes, you should see the number of photos found printed to the console. Downloading and displaying the image data. In this chapter, you will use the URL returned from the web service request to download the image data. Then you will create an instance of your image from that data, and finally, you will display the first image returned from the request in a UI image view. Now, in PhotoStore.swift, implement the method fetchImage to download the image data. Like fetchInteresting Photos method, this new method will take in a compilation closure that will return an instance of image result. Now implement a method that processes the data from the web service request into an image if possible. Open main.storyboard, make a connection for image view. In Photos View controller.swift, implement method update image view, which can call the image view when fetching success. Build and run the application. Now that the image view is being updated on the main thread, you will have something to show for all your hard work. An image will appear when the web service request finishes. It might take a little time to show the image if the web service request takes a while to finish. Congratulations! You have built the first web-enabled app. See you next time.